We are live. Howdy, everybody. Aaron Boster here, and thank you for learning about MS with me. If you're looking at the screen, you may have noticed something. I'm not by myself. So today we are joined by an expert in the field of medical marijuana and cannabis, a friend to the channel and a friend to me. Austin, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, so much. Let's invite Austin and make him feel welcome by filling the chat with flames. If you're watching right now, flame up the chat and let us know that you're excited for Austin to be teaching us today about medical marijuana and multiple sclerosis. Go ahead and take a second and fill up those flames.
So excited to be with you all.
This is going to be awesome. Now, once the chat is full of flames, we're going to get started. I want to do some introductions. We're going to talk about tonight's live stream and what we're trying to accomplish tonight. Oh, there we go. Look at that. The flames are a-flaming. We've almost got, oh, there you go. Okay, Austin is officially welcome to the live stream. This is a monthly event where we get together as a global growing online community to up our game, to energize, to empower, and to educate. And today we have a special focus. Today we're talking about ganja. No, medical marijuana. We're talking about cannabis. And I have gone through quite a journey in my understanding of medical marijuana. It gone from being a hater to someone that sees potential benefits beyond what I ever could have imagined. And the vast majority of that knowledge came from this guy. And so I am super excited that he's here today to teach us. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing some introductions, and I have a couple other channel announcements. But in the next 5 minutes, you are going to get to learn from Austin about medical marijuana and cannabis. MS Water Challenge, when I drink, you drink. So drink up. Austin, you can too if you want.
Yeah.
Now, before we get started, that was very loud. Before we get started, I wanted to show you guys something that is super, super special to me. So what you see here is a gorgeous framed logo, of the Boster Center for MS. And there's an amazing family that presented this to us. And I was just amazed. It looked really cool. And the paper, as you can see, is handmade paper. And then I read the back, and I'm going to read it to you. This handmade paper sheets are made from 100% post-consumer recycled materials, containing packaging, cotton balls, alcohol swabs, medication packet inserts, marketing materials, and statements from the multiple sclerosis medications beta-seron, Copaxone, Tecfidera, and Ocrevus, which have been used to treat my wife. The singed edges of the sheet signify how MS can be smoldering. Purple is Dr. Boster's favorite color. I am beyond moved that he made this paper from the inserts and from the packaging of medicines that his wife took, and I'm just absolutely honored. So I'm not going to call their name out on the channel, but I know that they're on right now, and I want to say thank you very, very much. And I'm going to put this back here so I don't break it by accident. Okay, so today, as we do this live stream, I'm not going to be giving you updates about the Boster Center. I'm not going to be talking about updates in research. Instead, we have a laser-focused discussion with a world expert on cannabis. In the next 2 minutes, I'm going to share my silly story, and then I'm going to completely shut up, and I'm going to learn from a master. Years back, I knew that marijuana was something kids did like behind the bathroom in high school, and they weren't supposed to. And I went to med school, and we were taught that it was a drug and it was bad for you. And then as the world emerged, medical marijuana started to become available in different states. And it became available in Ohio, and I'm a nerd. And so I read all the data, and I was very, very disappointed because there's a paucity of data. And that made me not into it. I really struggled. And so at first I was not on board with the idea of using cannabis in the treatment of MS. Then I did something which I should probably do more often. I listened to people. So I started to listen to patients, and in specific, these 70-year-old women that went to church 3 times a week, and they confided in me with the door closed that if they smoked a little doobie, they didn't need any of my nighttime medicines. They weren't spasming, they weren't having pain, they slept like a baby. And after 4 or 5 of these fantastic old ladies who didn't know each other all told me the same thing, I started to pay more attention. Now, fast forward, I've been a medical marijuana recommender here in Ohio for going on 2 years. I've learned a tremendous amount, and it's a huge benefit to my patients. Without any further ado, you guys are in for quite a treat. We're going to learn from Austin. Take it away, my friend.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm incredibly grateful. I just want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer. This is not medical advice. I am not an expert in MS. I've had MS for 12 years, so I guess that makes me an expert at having MS. And I've also used medical cannabis for about 11 and a half of those. I have worked in the cannabis industry for the past 3 years, and I have worked with several thousand patients that qualify in Ohio with all the different qualifying conditions. But my favorite is MS, and so I've kind of tailored this talk today to be a little more specific about MS.
I do want to add that at the end of the talk, we're going to open things up for a Q&A. I see that you're writing questions now, and I will try to go back and look through them, but we're going to wait. When you're done, then we'll go through a series of questions. So hold those questions till the end.
So cannabis is a vast lake of information, and just this class alone, there's a ton of information. I'm overwhelmed right now thinking about all of this stuff, and we are going to jet ski across the top of it today. So it's going to feel like a lot. You're going to have questions at the end. I'm going to give you my email so that you can reach out to me if you have direct questions, and I'm going to try to answer as many as possible. So let's see. The purpose of this class is to help someone that doesn't have experience with medical cannabis learn and feel more comfortable to go into the dispensary, get used to some of the terms that we're using, and have a well-rounded view of this, because I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so to get a clear picture of this, I think is really important for MS patients. So I'm 32. I've had MS for 12 years now. I was diagnosed in August of 2009. My presenting symptom was bilateral optic neuritis, which left me legally blind. So I'm not totally blind, but I can't really see myself on this right now. I can see the E on the eye chart when I look at it. So if you see me looking over here at my computer closely, that's what I'm doing. But initially, 12 years ago, the medications that were available had some harsher side effect profiles. And the one that I chose, I had to inject myself with 3 nights a week. I did that at night because the side effects of this would peak in the middle of the night. But I would still wake up feeling very terrible. I had a headache, wouldn't be able to eat, would throw up, tons of mucus, just not feeling good at all. And I actually described to people that I felt hungover. Now, I was 20, and some of my friends were beginning to party at that age, and I noticed that some of them were actually using cannabis for their hangovers. So I decided I had experimented with cannabis maybe once or twice in the past, but I decided I would ask my friend and see if I could get some and try it. The morning after my medication, I got up and went to the garage and smoked a little bit, and I came back in and I ate breakfast, and my headache went away, and I just had my quality of life went up, and my day was better, and I've never really looked back. That was my initial use for cannabis, was dealing with the side effects of that medication. As my MS progressed, I developed spasticity in my legs, and it really likes to flare up in the evening before I go to sleep. So cannabis is really great at a 1-2 punch for that, because it really helps with the spasticity in my legs. It also helps me go to sleep and stay asleep at night, which makes a big difference. And then I also use cannabis just for overall quality of life and mood, which I'll talk about a little bit more as we go along here. So I first want to start with the stigma that is around cannabis. The word marijuana is one. I think that the words that we use are very important. Marijuana was, that word was used to help create a negative light around cannabis to help make it illegal. And so we are moving from using the word marijuana to its actual name, which is cannabis, and that's what you'll hear me say a bunch in this presentation. There's another word that carries a lot of stigma, which is high. If I had $1 for every time a patient came into the dispensary and said, I'm open to trying medical cannabis, but I don't want to get high. That word, it's that word that I think is really the problem there. And so we're moving from high to medicated. I medicate with cannabis, and because you are legitimately using it as a medication. I think about, with the stigma, I think about like Cheech and Chong, right? Those are characters that we all know, but the genius thing about those characters is that they aren't what cannabis users actually look like. They're what everyone thinks they look like.
That's a really good point.
And so that's a great thing to look at the stigma, because as I became more open with my family and friends about my cannabis use, I found that it was almost like I was peering behind a curtain, and there were all these people that had experienced it with it and were using it, and I just had no idea about any of that. And so what I think you'll find is as you use medical cannabis and talk to your family about it, they will be more receptive than you probably think they will be.
Now, as we start the next point, I'm excited to share 10 minutes in, we have 215 people that have jumped online to learn from you today, which is pretty awesome. If you guys like where we're going with this, throw a thumbs up, or let's try to get the thumbs up above 100. There's plenty of you on. There's only 57 thumbs up, and this information is to die for. So let's push that thumbs up above 100. You got to jump out of the chat, hit the thumbs up, and jump right back in. As soon as we get that up, to show Austin a little love, he's going to jump back into his discussion. All right, we're at 84. Come on. So there we go. 100 thumbs up. Thank you very much. Right. God bless. We are back in the game.
All right.
Have at it, my friend.
Yeah, so let's talk about the 4 things, and Dr. Boster has echoed this before, the 4 things that I see cannabis helping the most with MS. The first being pain and spasticity. So cannabis combined with some medications, with some pain medications, can increase the efficacy of them. It also seems to have some pain-killing properties. And then it also seems to be pretty effective at dealing with spasticity. Now, I've seen it not touch someone with MS's spasticity, and then I've also seen it completely alleviate spasticity. So it is kind of an individual experience there. But if you are struggling with that, it is something to try. It is an option. The second, being sleep and insomnia. I think I mentioned before that I use the cannabis to help relax my legs, but also to help me go to sleep at night and stay asleep. That makes a big difference. Cannabis is generally sedative, and it's going to make especially a newer consumer sleepy. So it's very effective at that. Keeps me asleep at night. Some people that wake up in the middle of the night with spasticity can use it to help them go back to sleep. And then we'll talk about the methods of consumption and how fast the onset is and how we use that in a little bit. Third is nausea and appetite. And this was, I guess, the first thing I used it for, which it does stimulate your appetite. We've all heard of the munchies. And it also seems to help with nausea. Just as a side note, this specific property is really good at dealing with the side effects of chemotherapy and cancer, which I've seen great success with cannabis. And fourth is mood, just improving your overall quality of life. I'll give you an example of how I use cannabis that in a way that maybe people wouldn't generally think it is. So I can't remember the last time that I've exercised without medicating first. I use a Peloton. I haven't been using it as much as I've wanted to lately, but when I do get on the Peloton, I medicate before. A lot of people think that wouldn't make sense, but
and you're working out pretty hard. You're not just casually pedaling.
So and that's what I was about. So as I get heated up, and as a lot of you know, your MS symptoms sometimes get worse. And so as I get on the bike and start pedaling, my vision starts to get worse. I start to deal with some spasticity. I start to feel more uncomfortable with cognitive fog. And I found that cannabis allows me to tolerate that discomfort for a longer period of time and push myself deeper into a workout. And it makes a big difference. So there's actually videos online of Arnold Schwarzenegger using cannabis before he would lift because it would help him focus. So that's something that's maybe counterintuitive to the stigma out there, but it can give you an example of different ways that you can apply it.
Before we go further, can we just highlight those areas? I think Austin just went over something which is so important. Cannabis is not going to slow MS, but it can treat some really important symptoms. And he just listed 4 categories that I want to review. Number 1 was neuropathic pain and spasticity. And I agree that in my clinic, helping people with cannabis has done amazing with spasticity with neuropathic pain. Number 2 was appetite and nausea. And there are situations where people impacted by MS, whether it's because of the MS or because the medicine I'm giving them may be dealing with those issues. Number 3 was sleep and insomnia, all right? It's extremely common that patients in my clinic struggle with insomnia. Very, very common. And I have been blown away by the success of using cannabis for that specific indication. And number 4, I always comment on irritability. And I think a broader comment you made was on mood in general.
Yeah. So, I have like there's a joke like, do you want to go to this 2-year-old's birthday party, or do you want to medicate with cannabis and go to this 2-year-old's birthday party? It just makes your ability to tolerate discomfort or a negative situation, it makes that better. I found, probably not medically, but I found that like Thanksgiving is much easier to deal with the family if I medicate beforehand. So it definitely has an impact on mood. Okay, so I'm going to read the title of this next topic, and we're going to talk about the actual plant now. But the title for this is Indica Sativa Hybrid and All That Nonsense. So let's talk about the cannabis plant. Cannabis originated out of Central Asia around 6,000 years ago. It was spread around the earth by humans, and it evolved and adapted to live in the different climates, and that's how we have the variety of cannabis that we have today. There are 3 types of cannabis: cannabis indica, cannabis sativa, and cannabis ruderalis. Cannabis ruderalis is hemp, and we're going to forget about that one for now. Cannabis sativa and indica, and then in the dispensary we have a combination of the 2 of those, which is called a hybrid. Now, what I'm talking about right now is just the plants. In the absence of actual science, the illegal black market has associated feelings with these botanical names for cannabis. This is not correct. This is not true. I have seen a wide variety of reactions to different types of cannabis. And they said, so to say that this type of cannabis is going to do this to everyone is just not true.
And so if we can just throw out the common misbelief and then dispel it. So I would you say that commonly people think that an indica plant is going to be sedating and a sativa is going to like wake you up or something?
Exactly. So an indica plant, which indica plants come from mountainous regions. So they're short and fat and hardier plants because they're closer to the sun and they have to be able to survive a mountainous climate. So these are said to be more sedative. There's actually an old thing that's indica is like indicouch. So to help remember that. Again, not true. It's going to be your own personal experience. Sativas are from equatorial regions. So they are tall, they have the big fan leaves. When you usually see a cannabis leaf, it's typically a sativa leaf. It's the most recognizable. So those are said to be uplifting. Now, I had a sativa last night before bed and slept like a baby. We just haven't had any way to quantify and explain to patients what the cannabis is going to do to them. And so it's really crazy, but I know that this is not true, and it has still informed a ton of my purchases in the dispensary because we don't have anything better. I buy indicas all the time because I use it to relax my legs and go to sleep.
So if somebody is new to this entire space, they have multiple sclerosis and they have some of the symptoms we've discussed, they go through the process of getting a card and they go to a dispensary, what do they do?
So it's going to take a lot of personal experimentation. You're going to have to try some different products. We are trained in the dispensary to help guide you to different products based on your taste. It's a really good idea to keep a journal because it will allow us to help narrow things down if there was a specific product you really didn't like. The joke that we have in the dispensary, actually, because things have been crossed genetically so much, is that everything's a hybrid. And I think that's a pretty good approach is that it's going to create the whole spectrum of feelings, and how it affects you is going to be individually, is going to be an individual experience. Now, as we abandon the indica sativa paradigm, the industry has started to shift towards claiming that the terpenes, which are the flavor and aroma of cannabis, affect the way that it makes you feel. Now, this might be true, but if it is, it's like essential oils. It's not like very definitive, and there are also some flavors that sativas typically produce, and some flavors that indicas typically produce. Lose my train of thought, Dr. Boster.
So if we're trying to understand what the plant does, oftentimes we're talking about cannabinoids. We're talking about CB1 receptors and THC and CB2 receptors with CBD. Here you're adding a layer of complexity to our understanding that the aroma, taste, smell might be determined in part by terpenes.
Yeah.
Terpenes don't have psychoactive properties, I don't think, but they can change the flavor profile.
Yeah. So like a similar one is, or a common one is linalool, which is in lavender. So there might be something to that, but the way that I explain the way that cannabis makes you feel to newer patients is if you have any experience with alcohol, the way that alcohol, the different types of alcohol makes you feel is very similar to the way that the different types of cannabis will make you feel. Whereas someone that has experience with alcohol can drink a glass of wine and feel a little bit of a different buzz than if they had a glass of whiskey. But it's very, very nuanced. And if someone has never had alcohol before, they're just going to get intoxicated. They're just going to get a buzz and not be able to tease that out. So don't get caught up in that when you go into the dispensary. But you'll see it's still the main thing that the dispensaries are using right now, which is very, very frustrating to me. So it's all personal experience, and it's very important to keep a journal. Now, the thing that I think really affects the way cannabis makes you feel is your mindset and the setting that you're in. So for instance, I used the sativa last night, but I was tired before bed and it helped me sleep. So I think that is probably the biggest factor in determining that. I have when we try edibles for the first time, it typically takes 2 hours, 45 to 90 minutes to kick in, but we're going to wait a full 2 hours. But I tell patients that if they have a nighttime routine, take the edible and then do the nighttime routine so that when that kicks in, you're in a nice, relaxed space. What I advise against is taking the edible and holding onto the bottom of your chair for 2 hours and waiting for it to kick in, because it will amplify whatever mood that you're in, and it's less likely that you're going to enjoy yourself in that situation.
And if I can highlight something that I think is so important, if somebody has some experience with, we're going to talk about different kinds of ingestion, with like smoking marijuana, an edible is a different experience. And so Austin just said something which is really, really worth repeating. Particularly if you're learning for the first time, you want to take an edible and then you want to wait and you want to give it time so you can see, because it's not gonna kick in like a joint.
Yeah.
And so you can, in order to figure it out, I agree, you take it and then you wait a couple hours.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we get to methods of consumption, but the metaphor that I use is that we want to wade in and not dive in with cannabis. But okay, so let's talk about the cannabinoids in cannabis. So THC is the psychoactive compound in cannabis. That's the primary thing that we're using in dispensaries. So that's what's going to have an actual effect on your mood. But there are a ton of compounds in cannabis, and most of them we don't know much about yet. There is one that's also become very popular called CBD, and that's cannabidiol. And that's a very interesting one. Seems to have some anti-inflammatory properties. Some people seem to see that it helps with their mood, which I think is interesting. But one thing anecdotally that I've seen it help with is it does seem to reduce the psychoactive effects of THC when taken together. So in the dispensary, if I have someone that's telling me that they're having an uncomfortable experience, then I might try decreasing the THC and increasing the CBD ratio there.
Okay.
Look, for someone that's going for max potency, CBD might not be what you're looking for in that situation. But there are also a lot of other cannabinoids. There's CBN and CBG. And so there's an idea called the entourage effect. And that's that the cannabinoids work better together than individually. So I like to look for full spectrum products that are closer to the actual plants, compounds, and structure than say like a vape cartridge that has THC distillate in it. That's only THC in that. I just have found it seems to be more therapeutically active for me when I look for products like that. And now we get to the crazy part, which is misinformation and the lack of science all around cannabis right now. And this is a very important part to pay attention to.
So if you weren't paying attention earlier, you're going to need to rewatch what we did because he just gave us some awesome knowledge. But this is going to become very, very important. Drum roll.
Yeah, and so this is the thing that I see cannabis actually hurting people, is all of this misinformation out there, because in the absence of science, there have been a bunch of snake oil salesmen that have moved. I think that there is absolutely a place for cannabis in MS and can help improve the quality of your life, but there are some crazy claims out there. So a big example, and one that I personally rally against all the time, is a product called Rick Simpson oil. And this is sold in all of the dispensaries. It's called RSO for short. And it's a very crude form of hash. And it was made by a man in Canada named Rick Simpson. And he has a whole website and a bunch of books all about, but he makes insane claims about what this RSO can do, including, like, here, this is from his actual website. I just thought I would read this to you exactly. Cannabis can be used with great success to cure or control cancer, MS, pain, diabetes, arthritis, asthma, my personal favorite, infections, inflammations, blood pressure, depression, sleeping problems, and just about any other medical issue that one can imagine. That is like the literal definition of snake oil salesman.
So in case you turned on the live stream at that exact second, Austin is not suggesting that any of those things are true. He's dispelling some nonsense at a very, very popular website.
Yeah, and so it does bother me that this product continues to carry his name because people are going to his website and reading this information about it. I think that that's a good product. It's a full spectrum hash. I think a lot of people get relief from that, whether ingesting it because it's already activated or putting it on topically. Some people inhale it. I wouldn't recommend that because it would probably be pretty harsh. But that's just an example of where all this, how people have come in the absence of scientific data and taken advantage of these things.
Yep.
And so it's very important to watch out for those. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And so that's what I hope to be for you, is to be a resource that you can ask if you have any questions specifically about something and whether or not this is snake oil, because I'm just constantly looking for it to try to protect you guys.
And we'll include contact information for Austin in the description section after the video live stream's over. So you'll be able to go back and figure out how to contact him.
And, you know, Rick Simpson would qualify, would say that he is in alternative medicine. And cannabis is in the alternative medicine space. And so I'm really trying to get away from that word, as I'm big about words, and move from alternative to complementary medicine. We're not saying don't take your cancer treatment and eat a bunch of cannabis oil. Actually, that Rick Simpson oil is, for cannabis, it's titrating all the way up to 1 gram a day. They want you to ingest 60 grams in a 90-day period,
Wow.
Which is, I cannot imagine doing that. That is a very, very high dose. And yeah, that's part of it. It almost seems unattainable and very expensive. So to get the thing that they're claiming, you have to do the very unattainable thing.
So complementary makes a lot more sense. I'm an allopathic doctor, so I prescribe lotions and potions to help people live their best life with MS. And I agree with you that in my mind, the role of cannabis in MS symptom management is that it's a complement.
Yeah.
And so I may have someone who has baclofen and they also have cannabis. And together we've figured out how to make that work. I like that term also.
Yeah. I just really want to discourage anybody from thinking that this is an alternative cure to things as it's being claimed to be in some areas. That's
it's important.
Yeah. And so cannabis is a quality of life drug. As Dr. Boster said, live your best life. That's what I'm looking for in patients. And when I train employees, that's what we're looking for, is improving the quality of life. If I have a cancer patient that's coming in on chemo and he tries some edibles, and when he comes back the next time, there's more color in his face because he's able to hold a meal down and he's sleeping better, then I'm doing my job.
Yep.
It's not treating the cancer, but it is indirectly treating the cancer by managing his symptoms. It does not stop my immune system from attacking my brain and spinal cord. It does help me get a good night's sleep, which I know, as a lot of you know, if you don't get a good night's sleep, that starts to snowball in the wrong direction. And so to keep myself in a healthy, good place, it makes a big difference. And that indirectly treats my MS. And so it complements it well. So we're improving the quality of life for everybody. The last thing I want to talk about here is cannabis use disorder, which cannabis is habit forming. It does have some addictive properties. I can't quantify how much because we don't have the science behind that, but it does have, it is habit forming. So is coffee. There have been several different definitions of cannabis use disorder depending on who's defining it. Some people talk about daily use. Well, that really depends on the patient and the dose, and so it's hard to. So the way that I like to define it is if cannabis is getting in the way of your life, if it's reducing the quality of your life, if you find that you can't go to things without your cannabis first because you need it. So, like, if it starts to get in the way of your everyday activities, that's when I think we should talk about maybe changing and trying a different medication, or maybe stopping cannabis use. Really, that's what we're going for, is improving the quality of your life. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say about that one?
I think that as a medical marijuana recommender, I need to be in constant discussion with you about how it's going. And you might find some discussions about how to use it, but you may find some other discussions about it causing a problem. And I think we have to be open about that. In the same fashion that I may prescribe topiramate for someone for headaches, and it makes their lips tingle, and it makes them have cog fog, that turns out not to be a good medicine for that patient. We take them off the Topamax. Cannabis is not a panacea, and if we're having side effects which are interfering with the quality of your life, that's in counterpoint to what we're trying to do. So I just like that you called that out, because there are going to be some people where the side effects are worse than the benefit.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, and so you just have to. It's definitely in the recreational side of things and the illegal black market before cannabis was legal anywhere. There's a belief that it is not addictive, and that you can use as much as possible with no negative effects, essentially. It's kind of like the safety drug, kind of in the
black market
recreational space. Yeah. And so because of that, it carries this idea that it doesn't form habit or anything like that, but it definitely does and has those properties. So just keep an eye out for that. It's important that we keep that discussion open. All right, so now we're going to get into the fun stuff, which is the methods of consumption. So in Ohio, it is illegal to smoke cannabis, to combust it. The only approved methods of inhalation are vaporization, but there are two types of vaporization, and that is okay.
No, we're great. changing those things.
So there are two types of vaporization. It's really important that you understand the difference between the two. So the first one I'm going to talk about is dry herb vaporizing. And this is where you actually get the bud or the plant, and you would grind this up, and you would buy a device called a dry herb vaporizer. And they have some that fill up bags and some that are handheld. But essentially what this is going to do is cannabis combusts at 450 degrees Fahrenheit, but it starts releasing its cannabinoids around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So what a dry herb vaporizer is going to do is heat up it has several different ways of doing it, but heat up air that's going to pass through a chamber with that ground up flower in it. And it's going to heat it up below 450 degrees, but above 200. And you can set the temperature, and you can play around with strength based on that temperature as well, and flavor. Shoot, I lost my train of thought.
So talking about different ways of vaping.
Yeah.
Dry herb vaping is one of the two ways.
Yeah, so with dry herb in Ohio, the cap on THC percentage is 35%. And so in a dry herb vaporizer, the strongest amount of THC that you're going to be inhaling is 35%, and you're actually probably getting like 40% of whatever is in the plant by vaporizing it. But this is an interesting point. When you vaporize the raw flower, you actually get almost twice as much THC out of it as when you combust it. So it's actually much more efficient to vaporize the dry herb.
And is that just physics, like because you're setting it on fire when you smoke it, a lot of it's being burnt?
I do not know for sure why that is, but that is when they've measured that.
That's neat.
So I smoked cannabis for a while, and as it became legal in Ohio, and I got my medical card, I switched to vaporization, and that did make a big difference on my lungs. I noticed a difference in that. And so that's 35% max potency.
And that's the dry herb.
And that is the dry herb vaporizer.
Other vaporizer.
Now we're going to talk about the other type of vaporizing, which is cartridges, which is something that I think a lot of us are familiar with, or it's become very, very popular. It's probably one of the most popular products in the industry, if not the most popular one. But a cartridge is basically an e-cigarette cartridge that's full of cannabis oil. And that they have a standard one that's called 510 threading, and it will screw onto pretty much any standard e-cig battery. But there are also companies that make proprietary cartridges and batteries where their cartridge will only work with their battery. But this has a concentrate in it. And in Ohio, those concentrates are limited to 70%. But in other places, they can be as high as in the 90%.
Wow.
And so it's important to realize that when you're inhaling a dry herb vaporizer versus a cartridge vaporizer, that you're inhaling something that could be 3 times more potent out of a cartridge vaporizer. So this is a very important thing to keep in mind when dosing. So let's see. So
we've talked about smoking cannabis, which is illegal in Ohio, and definitely not my recommendation because of what it does to your lungs and your vascular system and nervous system. We talked about vaporization, both dry herb and then concentrate. Do you have a recommendation for someone who wanted to learn about vaporization, or is it really a trial and error about which is best?
So there are some differences between the two. When you're using a dry herb vaporizer, that's going to smell. Typically, like you would think cannabis smells like, people are going to know that you have it. Dry herb also smells very strong. So that's a factor with the cartridge vaporizers. It's very, very stealthy. So for people that have kids or that are around family members or that are on the go, cartridges are very, very useful.
Okay.
It's just important to keep in mind that that's going to be much more potent, so you need a lot less. One inhale off of cartridges to begin with, I think, is a good place to start.
Excellent information.
Yeah, so it's very, very important to know the difference between those two, and we could talk about more differences in the future. But the second form of method of consumption is ingestion, and this is edibles and tinctures. And so edibles are THC binds the fat, so they put it in pretty much everything. There's peanut butter, olive oil. There's a company that just came out with ghee, Buckeyes, cookies, brownies, all the things that you think of. And then tinctures which it comes in a dropper bottle, and it's a liquid, and it's either oil or alcohol, and that would be dropped under the tongue and held there. Some would get into your system sublingually, and then the rest would take effect like a normal edible. So edibles are going to take 45 to 90 minutes to kick in. For the first time you try an edible, you probably want to wait a full 2 hours just to be safe. 5 milligrams or less of THC. This is very important. 5 milligrams is sometimes more than enough for a patient to reach the desired effect. Some people have 5 milligrams and don't feel it at all, but we are going to wade in and not dive in.
So the average edible comes in what strength?
So typically a gummy is going to be 10 milligrams. Like recreational in Colorado, for instance, all of their gummies are 10 milligrams. That's like the dose.
So if you grabbed a gummy, that's too much to start with. If you're trying to learn about this for the first time, you're telling them to cut it in half.
Cut it in half.
Okay.
That would probably be the best place to start. And then wait that full 2 hours. And again, do your nighttime routine. If you have a bath, you watch a movie, read a book by the file, don't sit in a chair like this, freaking out. It will amplify, and I've seen people become very uncomfortable from that. Mm-hmm. Also, there was a patient I'm thinking of that came in and said he tried a 10 milligram edible, didn't feel anything for 20 minutes, so he ate 2 more of them, and then he couldn't get up off the couch for the rest of the day and had a very uncomfortable time. So that's what we're trying to avoid. If you're feeling uncomfortable, it's probably dosing, and we just need to reduce the dose. But just to give you a range, like I was talking about before with the Rick Simpson oil, people are titrating all the way up to 1,000 milligrams a day. I would not take that ever personally, but that's a dose that people are getting to. So we have a big range on that. I typically am around 80 to 100 milligrams is about the right dose for me to reach the desired effect. So just to kind of give you, 5 milligrams I don't even perceive. But other people, more than enough.
So that's where the trial and error comes in, and that's where that journal comes in, so you can go back and figure out what happened.
Exactly. So let's talk about the difference between tinctures and edibles. So edibles, right, are going to take 45 to 90 minutes to take effect. For someone that needs a quick onset, that can be very difficult. If you know that you're going to have a problem ahead of time, edibles can be great. But if it's something that just shows up in the middle of the night, inhalables are great for that. Like if I wake up in the middle of the night and my legs are spasming, I can grab my vape pen and get very quick relief. But for people that don't feel comfortable inhaling, tinctures are great because they're trying to bridge that gap between edibles and inhalables.
If I can give a quick example of what I consider to be a success story, a patient that I take care of uses a wheelchair, and he's not able to use his arms very easily. And he has trigeminal neuralgia, which is arguably one of the most severe pains that a human being can experience, where his face feels like he's being stabbed. And it hurts so bad, he tries not to cry, and he doesn't want to move his mouth, because if he moves his mouth, it's extremely painful. And so he's had surgeries, he's been on multiple different seizure medicines, and it's been actually a bit challenging to treat. We introduced cannabis, and it fixed it. But he can't suck on a vape pen because it hurts too much. So his wife can slide a tincture in his mouth and squirt the tincture in, and then it relieves the discomfort. And so I really view that as a success, and it was largely based around finding the right method of delivery for him.
Yep.
And I really was appreciative of cannabis that day, because it fixed something that we were having a really hard time fixing.
And that's what I specialize in, is trying to figure out what the best way to get cannabis into you is. So tincture is really great though, because they're bridging that onset gap. You're going to drop it under your tongue, and some is going to take effect within 15 minutes. And then you swallow it, and the rest will be like an edible 45 to 90 minutes. But you will get some relief. And for people with spasticity that don't feel comfortable inhaling, tinctures are a great product.
That's awesome. This has been so informative. Thank you very much. If people have further follow-up questions, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so I created an email called Ask Austin About Cannabis.
I'll put that in the chat
at gmail.com.
Ask Austin.
So please feel free to email me with any questions. I want to start a conversation with you guys. So I was going to tell this story at the end. when I was first diagnosed with MS and found that cannabis helped me, I didn't have anybody. And I got ripped off and shorted. I didn't know what I could get. The first time I had it, actually, I ate the raw flower in my room thinking that that would affect me, and that doesn't. So my goal is to be the resource for you that I wish that I had been.
It's awesome.
And so please, there are no stupid questions. Feel free to ask me anything. I also have an Instagram that I haven't posted on in a while, but I'm going to start up again. It's at comfortably_chronic.
So I'll put that in there. So
Instagram
at
that's probably my favorite slang term for cannabis.
Chronic?
Chronic.
So comfortably chronic?
Yeah, comfortably_chronic.
Got it. Okay, comfortably_chronic. So that's
that's my Instagram, and I'm going to start posting educational things on there now because I want to be more visible to all of you guys. I love working with all medical cannabis patients, but I especially love working with MS patients.
And we're very, very appreciative. Now, we've been chit-chatting for about 45 minutes. That was an awesome didactic. Thank you. There are 225 people that have jumped online, which is really, really impressive. If you guys enjoyed that lecture and you want to transition to some questions, we need some flames in the chat. So go ahead and fill up the chat with flames. Let me know that you loved what Austin just taught us about. Let me know that you're ready to switch over to a Q&A. So go ahead and throw some flames in the chat. Then we're going to make some changes here and start to do a Q&A. All right, so we've got Kate, who is all about the flames. We've got Nancy, who's all about the flames. Delaney is on tonight. Hello, Delaney. Got some flames. Angela's got some flames. John Hart is in the house. Marilyn has done it for us. Lydia has done it for us. I think they're ready for some questions. All right, so here's how this is going to work. We can't diagnose or treat you on the interwebs, okay? So if you ask a question, please try to frame it as a general question so that we can all benefit from it. If you don't have your question answered, normally I go back and answer them, although I may have to call on an expert to help out. All right, so let's start to look at, so first of all, Nicole says, what a fantastic presentation, thank you. And I most certainly agree. There's a bunch of flames, and so Sherry says nothing, I'm in Georgia, nothing here. And I actually run into that a lot.
Yeah.
Can we talk very briefly about how medical marijuana is state specific and how if you cross state lines, it's a very big federal problem? Yes. Just real quick so that people hear about it.
Yeah, that it is illegal to cross state lines carrying a federally controlled substance, or an illegal substance. So if you go to Michigan where the prices are cheaper than in Ohio, you buy, and when you cross the border, you're breaking the law. If you're caught doing that, it's illegal. And so, it's a kind of a patchwork right now. Some states will accept other states' medical cards. Some states won't. I know in Georgia, I actually just recently looked up the laws there, and they only allow very low dose THC oil, which is very strange to me. I don't understand that.
No, this is actually along the same lines. Alan asks a very relevant question. In Ohio, any chance of employment protection on the horizon? So if you could talk a little bit about the issues surrounding employment, I think anyone considering cannabis needs to be
Unfortunately,
clear.
No. Your medical card in Ohio will not protect you from your employer. This is something that we've run into multiple times in the dispensary. Also, people getting jobs and getting drug tested for the job. Your medical card will not allow you to fail the drug test for that. It's going to be up to the company. And that's very important to understand. Some states are starting to look at that. I know in Massachusetts, it's illegal for your landlord to evict you if you have a medical card. So there are some protections that are being formed, but we really need a federal legalization so that we can have laws across the board that are the same.
Now, John Hart asks a great question. Are there still concerns surrounding vitamin E in vape cartridges that could cause lung damage?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. That was a huge problem. So vitamin E acetate is in additives. What was happening is people were going into a dispensary and buying a cartridge, let's say a gram cartridge with a gram of oil in it. Then they would leave and they would buy an empty cartridge and they would put half of the oil in that cartridge and then they would fill the rest with filler. And that is how this vitamin E acetate was getting into these cannabis vape cartridges. In Ohio, it is very rigorously tested. There is none of that. It is pure cannabis oil in the vape cartridges.
So that's great news.
So
that's great
the illegal black market was producing that, and that honestly, that was such a problem that we're talking about. We need to federally legalize this so that we can address this on a national level.
Now, Nancy asks me, Dr. Boster, how do you feel about vaping? So I don't want you to smoke stuff, whether that be tobacco or cannabis. I think that if you need a fast onset of action, vaping is probably less pro-inflammatory than smoking. And I say probably because I don't think that we actually know, but just anecdotally, I think it's probably hurting your lungs a bit less. So I'm going to be very excited about edibles for my patients, tinctures for my patients, topicals for my patients. I will recommend people get a vape pen if they need a fast onset and a tincture is not going to make sense for them. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, personally, I think between the two, between cartridges and dry herb vaporizing is probably safer, just in my head, because you're literally just blowing heat through.
It's just the herb, and there's nothing that could be.
There is like kind of a wispy kind of smoke to, like a vapor to it, but it's not harsh, and probably the easiest on your lungs.
So Yusuf and a lot of other people said, great job, Austin. I agree.
Thank you.
Kate asks a very important question. She says, do you think it makes cog issues, word finding, worse?
Yes, it can do that, absolutely. And if that's a problem for you, that's definitely something to consider.
100% what he just said, I want to reiterate. It is true that cannabis can interfere with thinking and memory. And as we're all well aware on this channel, MS can cause difficulty with thinking and memory. So can a lot of the medicines that we use for spasticity, for pain, for bladder, etc. So when we're looking at the playing field, trying to game out how to make you think more clearly, we have to think about all that, including if there's cannabis use, including if there's other medication use. So I think that's a really good point. Kyle Roberts asks for the email address. I put it in the chat, but Kyle, I'm going to put it in the description below when we wrap all this up, so you'll be able to find it.
Just as a side note, like I get some cognitive fog, especially as I get heated up, like while I'm working out. And so in that situation, while the cannabis might make the cognitive fog a little bit worse, it also allows me to tolerate the discomfort of that more. So it keeps me in a state that allows me to not get as frustrated, I guess is what.
So Eyes Only says THC Capsules with a bunch of exclamation points. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about THC Capsules? So
it's essentially just a pill.
Like an edible?
Yeah, it would be an edible, but in pill form. We see that in the Ohio market. I know that would be moving towards a more traditional medication format.
Nice.
Which I think honestly helps.
It would help with dosing and kinetics. I mean, when we think about medicine, I can tell you like with great accuracy the onset, the peak, because we study all that in a lab. With cannabis, you kind of have to create that for yourself. So sometimes I'll ask a patient to kind of chart. If you take an edible, when do you notice it kicks in? When do you notice it peaks? When do you notice it wears off? Were there any side effects and what was the benefit? And if they can come back with that information, I think we can now start to have a conversation. And that's just me thinking about it like a medicine. Now, E asks a question, what's the smallest CBD THC ratio in tinctures to get more CBD?
Oh, they make every ratio that you can think of, but I've seen 30 to 1, 30 CBD to 1 THC.
So there's a huge variety.
Yeah, I mean, and same, topicals, same thing, lotions, massive variety of ratios between CBD. And that's why you got to keep a journal and figure out what works best for you.
So here's an interesting question. Do tinctures contain alcohol in addition to THC? Now, I think when you mentioned alcohol, maybe some people thought it was like drinking alcohol.
Some are alcohol based, and so the alcohol based ones are going to absorb faster under your tongue.
And that's because THC is fat soluble and it can be dissolved in alcohol.
They can make it water soluble. So that's one of the things they're trying to make edibles with a faster onset.
Got it. Yep.
So they're water soluble edibles.
Interesting. Easy Eyes says neuropathic pain. And so I think what we're putting together here is that oral or those THC capsules are helping. Marianne said, I missed the first half, so you may have covered this. But how long does eating type stay in your system?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I actually forgot to mention that. So edibles are going to last for 4 to 6 hours. And if this is your first time, probably longer than that. Inhalables are going to last 2 to 3 hours, but they're going to fully onset within 15 minutes.
So inhalables, meaning Vapes, like we've been talking about, you're going to see an onset in up to like 15 minutes, pretty quick.
But you're also going to start metabolizing it faster, so
it's going to be out of your system sooner.
faster. Exactly.
An edible is going to take upwards of 90 minutes to kick in, but then it's going to stay around for 4 hours maybe.
Yep. And that a lot of that depends on your own metabolism and what the edible is made out of and all of that.
So Alex asked an outstanding question. Does insurance cover medical marijuana for multiple sclerosis?
I wish.
As a medical marijuana recommender, I have some forms that we ask patients to fill out, which were given to me by my lawyers. And one of them clarifies, no, it's not covered by the FDA, and no, it's not covered by your insurance. And in fact, I think insurance wants nothing to do with this in the space, or at least that's been my perception, is that they're going nowhere near it.
Yeah, I would imagine we'll have to see federal laws change before we would see any insurance companies move.
Paul asked an interesting question. He says, great job, guys. Austin, do you have any experience with Delta H?
Delta 8?
8, I'm sorry, he wrote
Delta
8. I have 7.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I actually encountered that when I was in Chicago recently. There was a bakery that had these Delta 8 drinks. And I asked the guy behind the counter what that was about, and he explained to me that Delta 8 seems to be a little less psychoactive form of Delta 9 THC, which is what we're typically getting in products. It's very interesting to me. Some companies have figured out how to get around regulations using Delta 8 instead of Delta 9.
So is it a psychoactive substance?
Yeah, it is psychoactive, yes, but it doesn't seem to be as psychoactive as Delta 9.
Okay, that's interesting.
So they're saying like it might be a good product for new people to cannabis, but it's brand new to the scene. So
now Kyle asks, what dry herb vaporizer device would you recommend?
I really like for tabletops, which would be one that you would plug into the wall. I love the Volcano. And by that same company.
That's a brand.
Yes, and it's by a company called Stores and Bickel. They're a German company. They make the Volcano tabletop, and then they make a handheld one called I lost it in my head.
I can't help you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know.
But it's the same company.
It's called the Mighty. And it's like it looks like a big black brick, and it has some like arrows on it where you can change the temperature. And that is a fantastic product and lasts a long time. That's a problem that you run into with the cheaper vaporizers, is that they won't last as long. They'll get THC built up in them, and they'll have problems.
So Karen shares with us, when I take a gummy at night, I sleep like a baby, and I wake up rested and not tired. That's awesome.
Me too.
So Mary writes, so if sativa made me anxious the first time, it might not the next time. I don't know anytime I don't ever want to feel that again.
So it's all going to be a personal experience, and it's also your mindset and your setting at the time. So think about that time that you tried the sativa. Were you in an anxious state already? Were you in a place where that could have played a factor? I have found that there's a strain called Triangle Kush that there's a patient with PTSD, and he loves it. Helps him with his anxiety, helps him with his pain, buys it by the ounce. Triangle Kush typically gives me anxiety, so I stay away from it. It's like the exact, but again, really that might just, I haven't tried it in a while, and that might just be my mindset and the setting at the time that I tried it. I would be open to that a little bit more. But yeah, so maybe try an indica. So here's a very interesting thing that I found in the dispensary. I had a big glass case with a bunch of smell jars in it. And they had all the different types of cannabis in it, all the different aromas. I would try to pick ones with different aromas. And when a new patient came in, I would show them all these different aromas. I'd watch how they would react to them. And I would tell them that the nose knows. And so I've personally found the best way to find cannabis that I like is if you like how it smells, you're probably going to like the way it makes you feel.
Interesting.
There are things that smell great to me that smell terrible to other people, and vice versa. And I watch that. And so that my nose has led me to cannabis that I like.
So that's awesome. We've been going for an hour. We're going to wrap up. My name's Aaron Boster, and as always, thank you for learning about MS with me. Today, I am absolutely excited that we got to learn from a master in cannabis and medical marijuana as we learn about this complementary medication of sorts. If you've enjoyed what we've done, go ahead and throw some flames in the chat one last time and let us know that you dug what we did. And if you would like to hear more from Austin, hopefully you'll be willing to come back on the live stream sometime soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
And that email is there too, so you guys reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions however I can.
So we'll have your IG in the description down below, and that was at comfortably_chronic. And we'll also have your email, askaustinabouTcannabis@gmail.com. And all that's going to be in the back. Thank you again. I really, really appreciate your help.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone, until next month,
Bye, everybody.
God bless. Take care.